Do they come like in dreams, or are you just like eating a bowl of cereal and you go, "Oh, I got something here. Let me get a pen and pencil."
You're close because they often come at night. A
Mm.
story will wake me up, and I'll have to scribble it down in the dark, and then I'll wake up in the morning and I'll see these pieces of paper with scribbles on them and try to remember what I was writing.
This is the Living Numbers Podcast, and I am your host, Tony Rambles. This is the show where everyone's interesting if you ask the right questions. So, of course, I have to give you all my 4 appeals in 20 seconds. Ready, set, go. Number 1, share, rate, review, 5 stars. Number 2, subscribe on Apple and Spotify for the behind the scenes content. Yes, you need that. Number 3, follow on IG and TikTok at the Living Numbers Podcast. And number 4, cop a hoodie or a t-shirt, merch link in the description. And I know I got it under 20 seconds that time. Whenever we have somebody on for the first time, you know they have to get a wonderful intro. So, hailing from San Jose, California, he earned his bachelor's in journalism from BYU and his MA from APU. I said it like that because it rhymes, so that's cool. This is a bilingual author and digital media professor, has been nationally lauded by Publishers Weekly, Forward Reviews, School Library Journal, and many other well-respected publications. This man knows exactly what he's doing. He's said to be a deeply fascinating individual with a unique insight into life in the world of storytelling. That's a 5-star review if I've ever heard one. Creative writer, master linguist, and Mr. Diversity in the flesh. I present the Karl Beckstrand. Say hello to the people.
Hey, thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. And of course, we're going to get into all of the great things that you do. So we're going to start here with our first number, and it's 7-ish. So when I was looking at your bio and then you said there's 7-ish different countries that your ancestors immigrated from. So that sets the backdrop, I feel like, for a lot of the stuff that you've done so far. So, when did this multicultural background and your ancestry really start to influence you in your life and your decisions?
Oh, well, I'm pretty white. I'm a pretty white guy, but I do have ancestors from South Africa and Sweden and England and Scotland and France. But yeah, I grew up like you said, San Jose, California. It's a very cosmopolitan place.
Mm.
So I grew up exposed to a lot of different cultures, and I loved it.
What do you think influenced you the most, like from those cultures? Was it like something in sports? Was it some like after school activity that you did, some club you were part of? Did anything like make a stamp more than any other type of situation or club?
Um, Probably because I had peers from just all over the world and
Mm.
people that spoke different languages. My mom studied Spanish for years, so she would speak to us in Spanish in our house. And then, when she would run into someone Latino, she would speak to them in Spanish, and I always was impressed with that.
Is that when you did that plant the seed for you to kind of learn these other languages?
Yeah, yeah.
Would she do stuff like you can't answer like in English, like you have to start answering stuff in Spanish? I've heard that kind of be done around the house before.
Yeah, actually, she didn't, but I served a foreign mission in South
Mm.
America for 2 years, and before we went down, we had training, of course, in Spanish. And yeah, while we were having our training, we were told can't speak English.
What was one of the hardest things for you to remember?
Oh, well, I was learning Spanish.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
what was difficult was a couple words that sounded similar, nosotros and nuestro. And I was always get them mixed up.
So, what experience made you feel it was important to start like pushing this cultural diversity and all of these different kinds of things that are so important to you now. What experience was it where you go, okay, this has to be done?
So, like I said, growing up with a lot of different cultures around me, when I would pick up a kid's book, often there were these blonde haired, blue eyed kids, and I'd be like, that doesn't reflect the world around me.
Mm.
And so I always thought if I ever wrote a book, I would have it represent the true world, as it is.
So you're very thoughtful, just at an early age, huh?
Yeah, I hope so.
It seems like it. I mean, because not everybody is looking at the book in that sort of way. They're just like, oh, you pick up the book, you read it, oh, great story, and you go on to the next book. But for you to think like, okay, like every book is blonde hair, blue eyed kids, like that's not what I see in my everyday life living in San Jose.
Right.
Um, how did your faith factor into like the meshing of these two things that are so important?
So I was brought up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints. So
Mm,
I was taught that everybody's a child of God. We're all brothers and sisters. Um, so I thought that was really important to remember, even if I wasn't writing anything spiritual, which most of my books aren't. But I thought it was important that I keep that in mind, that my audience is my family, that we're all one big family.
So your faith, when did that start? Was that a mom thing? Did she teach you that as well? Or like what was church like growing up? Tell us.
So yeah, my my mom was born in the church, but not active till she was a teenager, and then she kind of had her own personal
Hmm.
experience with God, and so yeah, she taught me. And the cool thing about my mom was that because she had experience in and out of our church, she was very open about me learning other ideas. So if I had
Mm.
friends invite me to their church, she'd say, "Go learn." She'd say, "This is great. Go experience what that's like and find out for yourself."
Was it a specific church that one of your friends took you to that was a memorable experience? Is there any of them that where you go, wow, that was really different?
Oh, so I had friends. I went to church with a Lutheran church, a Baptist church. I've been to a
Mm.
Catholic mass. Um, I'd been to a Jewish ceremony. I think it was in a synagogue.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, lots of. And I've actually been in a mosque in Europe. So yeah, they all were neat experiences because you get to observe how people worship, and what I like to do is see things that I have in common with other people.
Mm.
Also went to an Eastern Orthodox church in Ukraine and
Wow.
stood for a really long time because they don't sit in their worship.
How do you think those going to all these different places and being in all of these churches helped you to grow stronger in your own faith?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I had friends that kind of challenged me on my personal convictions,
Hmm.
like, are you really Christian? And made me really go back and dig into my own faith and, evaluate, am I really Christian? And so
Right.
that was good. Helped me learn my own doctrine, helped me learn what my friends believed, make comparisons. So that was kind of an education.
Right. I was on somebody else's show and they were asking a lot of those kinds of questions, really challenging the faith because it was someone who had, I guess started to believe different things. He's not a Christian anymore. He's like, oh, I'm an atheist now. And so like, what is it this? What is it that? And so it really just kind of pushed me and like I kind of felt myself being annoyed at one point. And I kind of flipped it and was like, well, it really doesn't matter like what I say to you, like as far as like the Bible is concerned. Cause he taught the Bible, he taught Sunday school. I'm like, the stuff that's in there. Like for me, the thing that makes the difference, and you pointed it out, is the relationships, the people, and how is your faith helping you to treat other people? Because if it's not helping you to be a better person in real life, then what is your faith actually doing? How is it actually helping?
Yeah.
So that is the thing that I leaned on most, right? We could talk about sin and judgment and Old Testament, New Testament. I felt like that really wasn't the place to go in that situation because the guy knows that stuff. He had a bunch of scriptures, ready and stuff. So I'm like that, that's not the thing that's going to sway you at this point, right? And it's not my job to sway you anyway. I can only tell you like why I believe what I believe and how it's made a difference in my life.
Right.
So you saying that it really kind of brought that back because I'm like, man, that was kind of a tough show to do, but at the same time, I felt like it was needed, and I kind of feel like I came out, a little bit stronger, I guess, a little bit better, than I was before. Have you ever? What was one of those conversations like for you? Like, was it something that somebody asked or said where you went? What was the thing that made you go back and look like, huh? Okay, maybe I do need to do some more digging.
Oh, yeah. So, just little things at first when I was young. Had a friend I did Bible study with, and she would challenge me on things I believed. She'd like, "Oh, you believe in the a physical resurrection of your body, that you'll be resurrected in a physical body?" And I'd be like, "Well, that's what I was told." Then she made me go back and dig, and figure out why do I believe that? What's the scriptural
Right.
basis for that? Things like that. But what was really gratifying was years and years later, that same woman. Uh, Wrote me a letter, and
Mm,
because she had been someone who had challenged me as to whether or not I was Christian, and she wrote me a letter and she says, "I can see from your life that you are a Christian," and that was really nice
nice.
to have her say that of all people. The first person who ever challenged me.
Yeah. How do you live? That it says it'll you'll know them by their fruit, and so you just hope you keep making great fruit out there, and then giving glory to God like you did before. So when did you start to go? Okay, all of these things have combined to kind of make me a teacher, right? Because you do it through your books, and you are also a college professor. So when did you start to go? Okay, I need to go down this path, which actually brings us to our second number. 200 plus offerings of books, poems, short stories, so on and so forth. That, I mean, you've done all of this publishing. So when did it start where you go, okay, books?
Oh, wow! So I didn't like reading or writing as a kid, and I never had the goal
Okay.
to be a teacher. It's kind of funny. I wanted to be a rock star.
Yeah.
I actually did get to sing in a few bands, but I realized that I wasn't quite at the level to be a professional rock person,
Mm.
so that was just a hobby. But yeah, in college, I was lazy. I wanted a short program. I wanted to graduate quickly, so journalism journalism was a short program.
Mm.
But once I got in, I just loved what I was learning. I got really good writing chops. And I also got ambushed by story ideas just constantly. I was scribbling them down and setting them aside and thinking, oh, yeah, when I'm old and retired, maybe I'll get published. But yeah, it's just funny because I didn't enjoy reading or writing when I was young.
Wow. That is the funny part. Because as a high school teacher myself, I see a lot of kids and they're like, no, I don't read. I think some of them may do. I'll say you definitely have more writing than reading, and for you to have that story and then to literally publish dozens of books now, not just of your own, but then going in to help publish and write and illustrate others. When did you start to go? All right, let me take these scribbles from just scribbles to now. I think these are books. I think I have something on my hands.
Yeah, I was very fortunate because, gosh, almost 20 years ago, I live in Utah now. I moved to Utah and I joined the League of Utah Writers. And
Ooh.
even before I was a member, I went to one of their events and I had my manuscripts in hand and I was going around. I think it was a picnic. I don't think it was an official meeting. And so I was really pushing the boundaries. I was going around saying, does anybody have an agent? Anybody know how I can get published? And
Mm,
I met a gentleman there who read through these manuscripts that I brought, and he pulled one out and he says, I want to publish this one. So I was
nice.
very fortunate to get published early.
Wow. My wife and I were having a conversation, I don't know, maybe it was last night, and she talked about how like she's always had this problem with like office politics because she's not really like chummy. You know, she's not an extrovert. She doesn't like or walk around talking to people all the time. She can talk, but it's not like her jam. It's not her thing. But
Right?
she's like this person that I know that's kind of a big deal at the hospital she works at. She's like this person somehow likes me. We've only had like one short conversation, but I told her it's not just what you say, but it's also like how people talk about you. So
Mm.
it definitely shows how you have to kind of get yourself out there. And if you don't do it, sometimes somebody else will for you. But uh, that's a perfect example of how you go and you
Mm.
just kind of had this vision and you're like, hey, I got to get out there some ways, somehow. So I'm going to take my manuscripts and let's see what shakes. Like, how did you feel when that person was like, okay, I'm going to publish this
I was shocked. Yeah, it
one?
was amazing. But the the really crazy part about that story is he was a small publisher, and he actually passed away the day we went to print the book.
Yeah,
He
tell
got
that
food
story.
poisoning. Yeah, he got food poisoning the day before, and I talked to him the day before, and he looked like he was okay, like he was going to recover. Food poisoning. I hadn't known anyone who ever died of that. But the next day, when the printer was printing the book, was supposed to go to print, his wife called me and she said he's gone. I was just
Wow.
floored, just couldn't believe it. And then on top of that shock, I had to learn what he was going to do to promote my book. And his widow was very helpful in giving
Mm,
me lots of information and things that I could do. But it was kind of a crash course in publishing for
right.
me.
What was the most difficult part of that learning curve? Because you hadn't published anything before, so here you go being
Hey,
thrown into the deep end.
yeah, I learned that writing a book is easy. Marketing a book is the real hard work.
Mm, that makes sense. Making a show is
Yeah.
is not that hard either, but trying to get people to go listen to the show or watch the show definitely takes a little bit more. I would say it takes a little more legwork, a little more intentionality, because I know how to do my show, right? This is 80 plus episodes, but marketing and getting it out there, like you have to really, I don't know, the word that keeps popping up is intentional. Like you have to know what you're doing in order to make that happen. So when did you start seeing some headway, like with your publishing? Like, because you had to just do it and you had to market it. So what was like a turning point where you go, okay, like what I'm doing is working?
So one of the things that I wanted to do with the very first book was make it bilingual, make it in Spanish and English. And my publisher said, "No, I don't think that'll be very popular." So he had set it up to just be an English book. But
Mm,
because he passed away, I was able to contact the printer and say, "Hold off, don't print yet." And I redid it
yeah.
with Spanish text as well. And that was a really good move because my Spanish books are among my most popular.
When did you get that inkling? Because I know now, like bilingual, especially if we're doing talking Spanish, yeah, I mean it's a huge upside for that because of the world that we live in. And you were in California at the oh no, you were in Utah, but California, I live in Texas, like these are huge Spanish speaking communities. So
Yep.
when did that thought become like, okay, yeah, this will make a lot of sense.
Well, because yeah, like you said, I grew up in a cosmopolitan place, San Jose. I think almost half of that city is Mexican American.
Yeah.
So I knew lots of people who spoke Spanish and wanted their kids to learn Spanish.
Mm.
So I just thought, yeah, if people want their kids to learn Spanish, why not do it while they're being entertained with a book?
It just made sense. One plus one equals five in that standpoint. Like you got way more than you could have bargained for.
Yeah.
Um, do you have like a book that's special to you, like that kind of makes you okay? So yeah, I see it in your eyes. You're lighting up here. Which book is that?
Yeah, so I worked with one other publisher before I started publishing my own work. And that
Hmm.
publisher came to me and said, "Do you have any true stories about an immigrant child?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. I grew up hearing stories of my ancestors, and several of them immigrated as children to America." So when I pulled out, it's called Anna's Prayer. It's about my great aunt who immigrated at 10 years old from Sweden. She arrived alone at like midnight at a train station in Salt Lake City. And the woman that was supposed to meet her and be her sponsor um, never got the letter that she was coming. And so
Oh
this little
God.
girl didn't even speak English. So she's alone in this train station, midnight, and she can't even ask for help. So this is the true story of what happened to my great aunt when she first got to America.
Wow. That is, man, that could never happen now. I feel like there's so many different avenues. Like, so what year was this when your great aunt arrived?
1888.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. I couldn't even
Yeah.
imagine what to do. Like, start crying, I guess, is the easy way to get some help.
Yeah. Well, she said a prayer, and then the book tells about how her prayer was answered, but better than she ever imagined.
Wow. Wow. That one's called Anna's Prayer.
Yeah.
Oh man. Um, man, that's extraordinary. What 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 was the thing that led you to write like all different kinds of books? Because you have like those true stories, you have the kids' books, you have tons of different kinds of things. So how do
Yeah.
you decide? Like, all right, I think I want to write this, or I think I want to write that.
So it's whatever comes to my head. Like I
Mm,
said, I get ambushed by story ideas. And it's funny, Tony, because people, when they find out I'm a writer and that a lot of my early books were kids' books, they'll say, "Oh, I always wanted to write a kid's book." And I'll say, "Really? Tell me about your idea." And often they'll say, "Well, I don't have one." And so inside I'm thinking, so you're not like me at all because I just get tormented
mm.
by the story until I get it written down. It just comes and it doesn't leave me alone until I get it out.
Wow, do you feel like that's a gift from God? That's the first thing I thought of.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And yeah, I've written short stories, and I've written a collaboration actually with my grandfather, a Western novel. We won an international book award. I've written a
Mhm.
self-help book for LGBTQ Christians, and yeah, working on some more short stories and picture books now.
Do they come like in dreams, or are you just like eating a bowl of cereal and you go, "Oh, I got something here. Let me get a pen and pencil."
You're close because they often come at night. A
Mm.
story will wake me up, and I'll have to scribble it down in the dark, and then I'll wake up in the morning and I'll see these pieces of paper with scribbles on them and try to remember what I was writing.
Yeah. That reminds me of a Seinfeld episode where he had this funny joke. He woke up, he wrote something down, and then the whole episode is just about him trying to figure out what what he wrote down, and he never.
Yep.
I think he remembers like at the very end. Oh, Seinfeld's great. Uh,
Yeah.
do you always get? Because I know sometimes, like with with when God speaks through like dreams, like you don't always get like the full story right away. It's kind of like pieces. So
Mhm.
is that how it works for you? I want to hear more about this. How you get these
Okay.
ideas and how they come.
Yeah. So some stories come quickly and completely. Like
Mm,
one story I wrote in 20 minutes, but like Anna's Prayer, it took like 6 months because I had to go back and research. I had to find the family letters and journals and put the pieces together and polish it and make sure I had a beginning, a middle, and an end.
right,
Um, And yeah, that book kind of bit me with the genealogy bug because after that book, I was like, I want to know more stories from my own family. So I
right.
dug up a whole bunch of more biographies and letters, and I've published three more kids' books on true stories about immigrant children. And then I have written several biographies of my ancestors back as far as 7 generations back.
What's your favorite kind of book to write?
Probably the nonfiction, the biographies,
Mm.
because they're true.
Do you ever get any stories that you don't end up putting into books? Like, okay, like I got something, but maybe not enough for a book, or is there anything that kind of falls in the middle or just short of a book?
Yeah, you have a writer's mind. I have file folders full of story ideas, and some of them are complete, and some of them are just little pieces that may fit into a story later. But the fun thing
Mm,
about that is, um, I speak on writing and publishing often, and I tell people that I'm speaking to, cut your darlings, and that expression means there may be a part of your book that you're just totally in love with. It's your favorite part, but it doesn't really help move the story along. It doesn't really help the story, but you just really love it. And what it means to say cut your darlings is sacrifice that favorite part. If it doesn't help the book be a good book, if it's a distraction from what you're really trying to get to, then take it out. But the nice
right.
thing about that is if you cut something out that's just really special to you, save it, put it in another book.
Man, that's a good. I've heard that before, like with podcasts, because I went to this conference, and you have tons of people giving talks and stuff, and they're like, well, if it doesn't really fit in your show, then like just take it out. Like you got to cut it. Like even if you like it, if it doesn't make sense for what you're doing, and I think we can kind of apply that to life. Okay, you may really like something, but if it doesn't really fit with what you're trying to do or where you're trying to go, sometimes you got to cut those things completely out. Sometimes you got to scale them like way back. I used to play my guitars 4 or 5:30 in the morning, and then when I had a son, there is no more time and
To do that.
space to play guitars, but it's more like scaled back. Once he gets a little older and I can have him in the room with studio equipment and not worry about him destroying it, then it's something that maybe can be brought back a little bit. I recently stopped coaching because I'm going to get my master's. So
Oh,
kind of
awesome.
scaling back and figuring out where things fit is great. I mean, it's necessary and sometimes painful.
Yeah, I hear
So
you. Boy, the nice
yeah,
thing
go
about
for it.
your sports and music is those are both things you can share with your son as he grows older.
Mm, yeah, that's a good point, and I plan to do so. Um, how is the creative process different when you're writing different stuff? You talked about some of the ancestry stuff in the nonfiction, but what about
Mhm.
when you're writing, the stuff with the cute butterfly, those kind of things? How does the creative process differ?
Yeah, because I do have a couple of books. One of them is Butterfly Blink. It's
Hmm.
without words. I actually have three books that don't have any words. And
Nice.
so that's very different because I only illustrated one of those. The other two were done by professional artists. And in working with the artist, it's kind of difficult to say. Typically, I would give them a manuscript, but I don't have a manuscript. I just have notes. Like, okay, on
Right.
this page, if you want to have this. So that was very different. Also, working with other writers. So about four of my books are collaborations. And it's funny, I've joked in the past that I only collaborate with dead writers because every one of my collaborations have been with people who've already passed away. One was my
Wow.
grandfather. He had a Western novel that he'd written, and it just needed some character development and some holes in the plot fixed. And so, yeah, after he died, my mom gave me his manuscript, and I just beefed up those characters and made the story flow better. And yeah, we won an award. And then another dead author I've worked with is a great great aunt who wrote the story of her mother who walked across the plains about 1,000 miles, and her shoes
Wow.
wore out. And so that manuscript, also with a dead author, I was able to pull other information from family history and polish it and give it a better flow.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, different techniques in those different circumstances.
What's the biggest difference when writing something without words and writing something with words? Because I mean, that's probably got to be like a huge step where you go, I think this book just needs pictures. I don't need any words here. Like, how did you
Right.
how did you get to that conclusion?
Again, the stories just come to me, and so in the case where there's no words, of course, no words are coming to my head, but the idea is coming to my head.
Mm,
And the first couple of wordless books, I had detailed notes on what should happen on each page. But the last one, I had worked with with illustrators enough to know that they often come up with some really good ideas. And so now, whenever I give a manuscript to an illustrator, I don't tell them what I think it should look like because
Mm.
I want to see what they come up with. And then later, if there's something that I had that was better on a certain page, I'll tell them. But first, I want to see what they come up with because often they come up with much better things than I do. So with this last wordless book, it's called Go for Golf. And I told
Mm.
the artist, I have some ideas, but I just want to see what you come up with. So I want generally the idea to be that these two gophers are golfing and having fun in nature, and other animals are interacting with them. And he took that and ran with it. He did a great job.
I like that idea because you're going to these people and this is their expertise. Like they are illustrators. This is what they do. So
Yeah,
when you give them too much direction, it can kind of stifle their how their creative mind works. That was like if somebody said, "Okay, I need everything typed out from front to back, however you get it." That's not how your process may work. So it's like, you're kind of cutting my cutting my knees off here from up under me. That
right.
reminded me, and you're a teacher as well, so maybe you could speak to this too. When I have projects that I want my kids to do, I'm a speech teacher, communications, so I teach a
Awesome.
lot of different like leadership stuff. I get captains eventually, and they have to like draft their team, so they have to figure out, okay, do I want my buddies or do I want people who are going to do work? Do my buddies do any work? Am I going to have to carry them? Or do I go for just the smartest kids? So there's like a lot of balance that has to happen. And that's what I'm trying to teach them because that's real life. You're going to have to try to balance these things in these relationships. And so a lot of times with my projects, I like to give very basic directions because I want them to kind of take it and run with it and make something creative and make something that's true to them or their group. And so they'll ask me questions and I will go, what do you think? Just like that.
Yeah,
And they'll go, well, I don't know. Like, what do you want me to do? I'm like, well, I don't know what I want you to do. And so, like, there's this ring around a rosy a lot of times with kids who have never been really given that opportunity to think for
right.
themselves. They've always been like told, this is the rubric, this is step one, this is step two, this is how you get to the end, this is how you get your A. Have you experienced a lot of that being a professor for as long as you have been and teaching these kids? I'm basically handing them off to you. So how does that factor into what you see in the classroom?
You are an amazing teacher because not a lot of teachers give students that opportunity, to open it up to them and see what they come up with. And yeah, I do the same thing. I taught journalism, and then now I'm teaching digital media. And
Hmm.
so a lot of that is graphic design. A lot of it is art on computers. And so we do critiques in class every day. The students put up their work. I project it on the projector, and everybody says what they like about it or what they would do differently. And you're right. When you give them a chance to come up with their own solutions or ways of doing things, um, yeah, it can be a challenge at first. But if they know that's what their teacher is going to do every day, then their brain really does start to work and come up with solutions and ideas. And my students are the best helpers of my other students. Their input is what is really beneficial in the class.
Yeah, because like if it's just me giving all the critiques or the ideas or all the directions, it's one brain. That's one person with one perspective, as opposed to for me, it's a classroom full of teenagers, 14 to, maybe 18 or 19, depending on how birthdays fall. And I've often found that they can come up with so many great ideas and things that I haven't thought of, things that I'm like, oh, like that's good. And sometimes I'll give them a little bit and then they'll take off and they'll make
Yeah,
something way better than I could have ever asked for. And
right.
you also have to prepare yourself, at least I do, for when you get the duds and you
Yeah,
got kids that kind of take the openness of the rules and just do the bare
right.
minimum. And
Right.
so I'm like, I know I'm not gonna have everybody doing great work. But when you get those few that are really, really, really good,
Yeah.
then it makes it all worth it, I would say, as a teacher. Have you ever had any specific projects where you go, you know what? That's way better than I could have asked for. How did those work out?
All yeah,
Okay.
constantly. I mean, I'm always surprised by what my students produce. And again, if there is a dud, if there is someone who doesn't quite measure up, the neat thing about like a class critique that I do is having input from the other students. And if it comes from their peers, they'll listen more. They're like, "Oh, yeah, that's a really good input. That's a really good idea. I'll try that." And they help each other make better work.
I totally agree. Man, I love being a teacher. There's so much
Mm,
stuff happening right now where people are like, this sucks, the kids are awful, the parents are awful. And like I get that side, but I think for me, like when I go to school every day and I go to teach
mm,
these kids, like I know that I'm a teacher and I have something to offer them. I think a lot of people have kind of fell into teaching
mhm.
where they probably would be better served doing something else because it's not really what they want to do. And I think that's where you kind of see a lot of this strife, or these people haven't learned the tools in how to relate to maybe relate to kids or manage people or kind of let go of the reins a little bit, because sometimes we want so much control as teachers
Yeah.
that we're trying to steer these stallions. I would use that example when you kind of just need to let them roam and see what they can do. Have you ever run into maybe colleagues or been in a room with teachers that were speaking in that way or kind of had that mindset? And what did you do if you weren't?
Wow, you just identified like the key challenge for educators today. Because I think there are a lot of administrators out there telling teachers how to teach, and they're not, the administrators aren't teachers.
Mm,
And putting so many rules and requirements on the teacher, making it really hard for teachers to teach. So, gosh, what's the solution? Private schools where where they give teachers more leeway. Public schools have a lot of hoops to jump through. The teachers have to do a lot of stuff.
yeah, they really do, especially if you teach like a subject where there is like statewide testing. So there's like it's all
Mhm.
about the scores, it's all about the numbers, instead of trying to build a culture where learning is expected and success is expected. This is what we do. You know, it's yeah, like you said, this is a ton of stuff out there that's it's difficult. Um, but I think from there, we can get your steadfast opinions on some of these things. Where I introduce my three whats, and
Okay.
so my first one is what's an opinion that you have that will be considered unpopular.
Boy, well, I would hate to think that it's unpopular. Um, and I've mentioned it, and that is the idea that we are all one family. We are all brothers and sisters, and no
Mm,
one is better or more valuable or more important than anyone else. Um, I would hope that's not unpopular, but I see people out there in society who have other ideas. Think that
right.
certain people are better than others, and I hate that because it's not true, and it's detrimental to everybody. It's detrimental to the people who believe it.
Absolutely. It was like you're cutting yourself off from a whole set of people that could have, tons of influence, good influence on what we could be doing going forward and how to help our society. Definitely. I hope that's I hope that's not an unpopular opinion. I hope that we all
Uh,
come to think these things one day, but I understand where you're coming from. Okay. If you weren't in writing and publishing and teaching, right? The things that you do now, what would you be doing?
well, I'm doing what I'm doing because I wasn't a rock star. That's what I wanted to do, but yeah, I had skills, but I just didn't think they were quite where they should have been to be a professional. So, but yeah, that was my first love. You know, that was my
Rock
first
and
wish.
roll.
Yep.
Wow. Man, I got a couple of guitars in here, Carl. If you ever want to, nah. I think,
Jam. Yeah. That'd be awesome.
I think we're doing the right things. Okay. Last what? What advice would you give to someone in high school? I take this back to my kids in my classroom. I go, hey guys, Carl Beckstrand, world renowned author, has something to say to you. What would you say to those kids?
I would say you're going to surprise yourselves with what you're
Mm,
able to do. I remember being a teenager, not knowing what my skills were, not knowing what I could do, what my talents were, and being very insecure because I just hadn't had enough experience to know
right.
what I could do. And after years of doing things, I would tell myself, you're very capable, much more capable than you think you are right now. It's just
Mm,
a matter of trying stuff out. So yeah, I would encourage them to try a lot of different things, see where they have skills. But nobody has immediate skills, and even in places where they have talent, you still have to work and practice and develop yourself.
absolutely. Hey, kids, work on your skills. Listen in Mr. Franklin's class. Stop playing around. Get off your phone. All right, Karl. Please tell people where they can find your book, where they can find everything that you do. Plug it all here.
All right. My website is premiobooks.com, Premio books.com. But it's easiest to Google me, Karl Beckstrand, Karl with a K. You can find me on Amazon and Walmart and Target.
Mm, okay. I mean, that's what better place to end it? Like, if you're looking for great books to read, for your kids, I mean, books with no words, nonfiction, fiction, Karl's got you covered. Okay. Thank you all again. Thank you, Karl, for coming on. You've been great. I mean, teacher, author, you're doing a lot of great things. You're making this place a better place to be. So thank you. And of course, make sure y'all, oh, how could I forget? Follow me on IG and TikTok, the Living Numbers Podcast, merch link in the description. And we will see you all in the next round. Boom. Got it.